Dragons. 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 Imagine, if you will, a dragon. Imagine dragging these nuts across your face. Just like to apologize for my actions. They were inappropriate and childish. And now I have since learned my lesson. And learned that it's not okay. It's not okay to make dragon nut jokes now in 2024. Hello everyone, I'm Finn. Welcome back to finnfilms. Join me today as we are talking dragons, specifically every dragon in the Game of Thrones prequel, House of the Dragon. I've been absolutely obsessed with House of the Dragons over the last couple of years, the Grand Civil War of the Targaryens. I'm a massive Game of Thrones fan and a massive Westerosi lore nerd, so I thought it would be really fun if in today's video we discussed every single dragon in House of the Dragon, every single dragon that appears in House of the Dragon, as well as every single dragon that could appear in House of the Dragon. I'm talking every single dragon, from the smallest hatchling dragon like Tyraxes to the largest, most chunkiest death machine that is Vhagar. So join me today as we dive deep into the dragons of House of the Dragon. Before we start, I just need to say that this video will be divided into two main parts. The first part being every single dragon that has made an on-screen appearance so far in House of the Dragon at the time of recording, up to Season 2, Episode 6. The second half of the video being the rest of the dragons, all of the other dragons that appear in Fire and Blood and the Dance of the Dragons, some of which will likely make an appearance in later seasons of House of the Dragons, other of which may never appear in House of the Dragon at all. Just to note, guys, this video will obviously contain spoilers for House of the Dragon, some potential spoilers for future seasons, possibly season 3 and 4 of House of the Dragon, so please keep that in mind when you're watching the video. It's obviously we are discussing dragons and their dragon riders, so this will possibly contain future spoilers for future seasons of House of the Dragon, though we do need to keep this in mind that House of the Dragon does differ from Fire and Blood in a lot of ways. They've changed a lot of elements from the book, so it is very possible that just because a person rode a dragon in the book Fire and Blood, that doesn't necessarily mean that that will happen in the show House of the Dragon. Okay, with that out of the way, let's begin with the biggest and baddest and oldest dragon of them all, Balerion the Dread. Oh, what was that? You thought I was going to say Vhagar, didn't you? Nope. First, I want to talk about Balerion, the Black Dread, one of the most badass dragons in all of Westerosi lore, the dragon that belonged to Aegon the Conqueror, the man who united and conquered Westeros. Now, right now, you might be thinking, Finn, what are you talking about? Did I miss something? Balerion has never made an appearance in House of the Dragon. Well, technically, you are wrong, because Balerion does make an appearance in House of the Dragons. It's just already dead by the time our show starts, so we just see its massive skull. I wanted to talk about Balerion in this video because Balerion is considered to be the most feared and greatest of all of the dragons from this time period, as it was the oldest, therefore the largest dragon in all of Game of Thrones and Westeros, as dragons in Game of Thrones lore basically grow as long as they age, and they continue to age indefinitely until they become too large to basically move, basically dying from obesity. And this is what indeed happened with Balerion the Black Dread, a dragon that lived over 200 years and was ridden by Aegon the Conqueror when he conquered and united all of Westeros. The last person to claim Balerion was actually Rhaenyra's father, King Viserys. However, he actually only owned the dragon for like maybe about a year before it did eventually die of old age. According to Fire and Blood and our other text sources, Viserys only rode Balerion possibly a handful of times, the young prince at the time planning to fly Balerion to Dragonstone, but he worried that the dragon was too old and too large to make the journey, so he simply just flew around King's Landing a few times. For all the that Viserys gets in House of the Dragon for being like a weak king, the fact that he actually claimed arguably the most fearsome, the oldest, and the biggest dragon of them all in Balerion the Black Dread, even if it was in its final years, to me just shows how much of a badass and how courageous that Viserys truly was at heart. Next, we move on to one of my favorite dragons in all of House of the Dragon, Caraxes the Bloodworm, ridden by easily my favorite character in House of the Dragons, the Rogue Prince Daemon Targaryen. Caraxes is depicted in House of the Dragon as a blood-red dragon, a lean worm-like dragon, as opposed to the more traditional kind of depictions that the other dragons take. I saw in one of the behind-the-scenes episodes, one of the showrunners describe Caraxes as being deformed, which I guess possibly explains why it is more worm-like. It has a much longer neck and is much lither than the other dragons, though I couldn't find any reference to, like, Caraxes being deformed anywhere in, like, Fire and Blood and, like, other source materials, so it seems like this is possibly just like a House of the Dragons show lore explanation. Let me know in the comments down below if it does state anywhere in the books that Caraxes was technically, like, deformed. During the Dance of the Dragons, Caraxes was said to be a large middle-aged dragon and was half the size of Vhagar, but what it lacked in size, it made up for in ferocity as well as speed. Caraxes was thought to be the fiercest of its hatchling siblings when it was first born and claimed by Prince Aemon in 72 AC, AC being after the Conquering. At the time of House of the Dragons and the Dance of the Dragons, Caraxes is the dragon with the most battle experience, outside obviously Vhagar, Meleys, and Vermithor, as Daemon flies Caraxes into battle to face the Triarchy in the Stepstones, as well as during the Fourth Dornish War by its previous writer, Prince Aemon. Caraxes is easily one of the most badass dragons in the show, and outside of Vhagar, I think it's the dragon that we've actually seen so far the most in House of the Dragons throughout seasons 1 and 2. Next, we move on to the 3 dragons that were born to the first 3 sons of Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, these dragons being Vermax, Arrax, and Tyraxes, each of these dragons as eggs being placed in the cradle of Rhaenyra's first 3 sons, these sons being Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey respectively. The eldest of these dragons, Vermax, belonged to the queen's eldest son, Jacaerys Targaryen, or better known as Jace. The dragon was born sometime between 114 and 120 AC after the conquest, and by the time of the start of the Dance of the Dragons, dragon was more than big enough to ride, Jacaerys being dispatched by his mother to ride to the north to treat with the Starks at the beginning of the Dance of the Dragons, which we see in our show. While being a young dragon, a dragon that had yet to see any type of combat, it had grown to a large enough size to be ridden and to be considered battled ready by the time the war between the Greens and the Blacks had truly begun. Jace regularly riding the dragon as a scout around Dragonstone and even riding it into the Riverlands to treat with the Freys, Jace using the presence of his dragon as a bargaining tool when negotiating with the Lord of the Crossing. Next, the dragon Arrax, which belonged to Queen Rhaenyra's second son, Lucerys, better known as Luke. Arrax hatched sometime after Vermax, probably 1 to 3 years later, although the date is not confirmed. At the beginning of the Civil War between the Greens and the Blacks, Arrax is depicted as being a much smaller dragon to Vermax, but is still big enough to actually be ridden by Luke. Like his elder brother at the beginning of the war, Luke was dispatched to treat with the Lords of Westeros, specifically dispatched to Storm's End to treat with Lord Baratheon, as his mother felt that this mission was much safer, as Storm's End was much closer to Dragonstone, and his dragon being much smaller, this would be an easier journey to make. However, Luke was not the only one to arrive at Storm's End, as his uncle Aemon One-Eye was already there with his massive dragon, Vhagar. Aemon and Luke would have a confrontation in the Hall of Storm's End, Aemon still holding a hatred for Luke after he took his eye when they were just boys. Lord Baratheon would order the two to leave, not wishing for violence to take place in his hall, Luke fleeing and mounting his much smaller dragon Arrax and taking to the skies while a storm raged down upon them. The much smaller dragon Arrax would struggle to stay aloft in this great storm, and suddenly the young boy and his dragon found himself being pursued by Aemon in the massive Vhagar. Vhagar reportedly being over 5 times as big as Arrax. It is said that in Fire and Blood, Arrax was the faster of the 2 dragons, and had it not been for the storm, it was potentially possible that Arrax could have outran Vhagar. However, due to the storm, Arrax struggled to stay aloft as Aemon and Vhagar swooped down upon them. Arrax and Luke would be killed in one swift motion, the massive dragon Vhagar cleaving the much smaller dragon in 2 with its fierce jaws, the body and the head of Arrax washing up beneath the cliffs of Storm's End 3 days later, and Luke's body was never found. Finally, the last of the 3 brothers dragons, Tyraxes, which belonged to the youngest of Queen Rhaenyra's first 3 sons, Joffrey Balerion. Tyraxes was depicted in House of the Dragon as being a hatchling at the beginning of the Dance of the dragon being no bigger than a dog, as we see in Season 2, Episode 6 of our show. This differs somewhat from Fire and Blood, where it was said that Tyraxes was actually big enough for Joffrey to ride, as in the book, Joffrey actually rides Tyraxes to the Vale when he is sent to ward there. It is possible that this dragon we see here in the scene isn't actually Tyraxes in the Vale, and is another one of the young dragons, possibly Stormcloud, though in a previous episode in Season 2, Tyraxes is described by Rhaena as being a hatchling dragon, so to me it very much seems that this is very likely Tyraxes. Next we have Sunfyre, the dragon that was ridden by King Aegon II, the elder brother to Prince Aemond One-Eyed. Sunfyre's egg was said to have hatched on Dragonstone and then was later claimed by Prince Aegon around 120 AC. By this time, Sunfyre was a young dragon. By the time of the Dance of the Dragons, the dragon had become a moderate-sized dragon. The dragon shown to be about half the size of Meleys, which we see in the Battle of Rook's Rest. Speaking of the Battle of Rook's Rest, this is actually the first time we see Sunfyre, and possibly even the last time we see Sunfyre, when Criston Cole managed to lure Princess Rhaenys and her dragon out into a surprise attack. But to the surprise of Criston Cole and Prince Aemon, King Aegon II would fly out on Sunfyre in his Valyrian steel armor of Aegon the Conqueror to face Rhaenys and Meleys in battle above Rook's Rest. Sunfyre would put up a valiant fight against the older and larger dragon, but it was pretty clear that Meleys outmatched the younger dragon Sunfyre. Sunfyre ultimately suffering a deep wound in the chest. It's very likely that Meleys would have actually killed Sunfyre and Aegon in this battle if it wasn't for the intervention by Aemond and Vhagar, as the king and his dragon would suddenly suffer a full blast of flame from the massive she-dragon, both the king and their dragon falling to the ground from a great height, where in the show it is presumed that Sunfyre is dead. But you know how Game of Thrones and their writers are. If someone is not confirmed dead on screen, then it's hard to believe that they actually are dead, so there is a small chance that Sunfyre might appear in later episodes of House of the Dragon, though it seems unlikely. Speaking of Meleys, it is only right that we discuss Meleys the Red Queen, one of the oldest and most fearsome dragons in House of the Dragons, Meleys being born sometime around 75 AC, making it anywhere from like 50 to 60 years old during this Battle of Rook's Rest. Described as magnificent by all those who saw her, Meleys gained her name the Red Queen for the pink membrane on her wings, at one point being one of the fastest dragons of any dragon alive. The dragon was said to have easily outpaced Caraxes and Vhagar when they were all younger. Meleys was originally ridden by Alyssa Targaryen, the mother of Viserys and Daemon, but after her death, the dragon would ultimately be claimed by Prince Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. At the start of the Dance of the Dragons, Meleys and Caraxes were the largest of the two dragons with riders on the Black's side, Meleys regularly being used to patrol the skies over Dragonstone and as well as in the Riverlands. In 129 AC, Criston Cole would lay siege to Rook's Rest, Princess Rhaenys flying out on Meleys to try and stop him, Meleys ultimately killing over 800 of Criston Cole's men. However, this was a trap. As I already stated earlier, Meleys would engage Aegon and Sunfyre in battle, Meleys getting the better of the younger dragon until Aemond arrived on the monstrous Vhagar. Meleys and the princess ultimately falling in battle and dying from a vicious attack from Vhagar, Rhaenys obviously dying from the fall. Next, we move on to Moondancer, the dragon of Lady Baela Targaryen, the daughter of Daemon Targaryen. Moondancer is another dragon that seems to have been slightly changed from the books, the dragon being depicted in the show as larger and older than how it is described in Fire and Blood, and generally this seems to be the case. Most of the dragons, especially the younger dragons in House of the Dragons, being depicted to be possibly a bit larger than they were in Fire and Blood. According to Fire and Blood, Moondancer was born sometime around Vermax, which makes sense as they are roughly the same size and how they are depicted in the show. Moondancer being depicted as a stark white dragon with a barbed tail. Although still a younger dragon, Moondancer was still large enough to fly and to be a fighting dragon as well as to be a threat. Its relative smaller size making it fast and agile, Baela and Moondancer regularly being used to patrol the skies over Dragonstone and the Riverlands. Up next we have Syrax, one of the most well-known dragons in our series and one of the dragons that appears the most in our series outside of Caraxes and Vhagar, the dragon belonging to Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen herself. It was said that Rhaenyra claimed Syrax as a young girl at the age of 7. At this time, Syrax was described as being a young dragon, which generally means it was around the size of Moondancer when Rhaenyra first claimed it. It's hard to know exactly how old Syrax is, really exactly how old any of the dragons in House of the Dragons is, but it is roughly between 30 and 50 years old, and it is one of the larger dragons that has a rider that belongs to the Blacks in the Dance of the Dragons. Syrax is depicted as a large golden steel dragon with a barbed tail, the dragon being a decent size in this scene, but in this perspective shot we see that it is much smaller than Caraxes, which makes sense as Caraxes is at least 25 years older than Syrax. We see Syrax again in Season 1, Episode 10 in the mirror of this Dragonstone Bridge scene, which takes place some 10 years later, and then again later on in Season 2, Episode 6, where Syrax does appear to be bigger, but it is kind of hard to tell in the show without perspective. After Syrax, we have the dragon Seasmoke, a great pale silver dragon that was first claimed by Lord Laenor Balerion, Rhaenyra's first husband. It is said that Seasmoke was born sometime around 100 AC, and that it was a young dragon when Laenor first claimed it. Seasmoke then is possibly somewhere between 5 and 10 years older than Syrax, though again it is hard to know how old the dragon actually is. According to Fire and Blood and the Wiki of Ice and Fire, Seasmoke was around 3 times smaller than Vermithor during the Dance of the Dragons, but it seems like the show has made Seasmoke a little bit larger, as overall it just seems like House of the Dragon has made all of the dragons a little bit larger than how they are depicted in the books. We first get an idea of Seasmoke's size in its confrontation with Adam of Hull in Season 2, Episode 6 of House of the Dragon, as well as in this teaser scene in Season 2, Episode 7 of House of the Dragon, where we see Syrax and Seasmoke in the same frame, and Seasmoke does appear to be noticeably larger than Syrax, which would make sense as it is supposed to be older. After Laenor's death, Seasmoke would ultimately remain riderless for a number of years, making its home on Dragonstone and regularly flying over the coast of Driftmark. In an attempt to find new dragon riders, Rhaenyra would ask Sir Steffon Darkling, a man with a hint of Targaryen lineage, to attempt to bond with Seasmoke the dragon, rejecting the knight and burning him to a crisp. Seasmoke would later be claimed by Adam of Hull, who in House of the Dragon is depicted as being a bastard of Lord Corlys Velaryon, many suspecting that it was this relation to Lord Laenor Velaryon which would allow Adam to ultimately bond with Seasmoke. Next we have one of my favorite dragons, the Great Bronze Dragon Vermithor. Vermithor the Bronze Fury. Just to note, this section on Vermithor will contain spoilers for House of the Dragon, so if you don't want any spoilers, go ahead and skip to the time on screen now. Vermithor is said to be the second largest and second oldest dragon in Westeros at the time of the Dance of the Dragons, only eclipsed by the monster that is Vhagar. Vermithor was said to be born around 34 AC, almost 100 years before the Dance of the Dragons, Vermithor being described as a bronze dragon with great tan wings. Vermithor hatching from an egg that was placed in the cradle of Prince Jaehaerys Targaryen, the Old King that we see in Episode 1, who reigned before Viserys. Upon Jaehaerys' death in 103 AC, Vermithor would remain riderless, dwelling on the island of Dragonstone and making its home in the caverns of Dragonmont. At the time of recording, we've only seen Vermithor one time, which takes place in Season 1, Episode 10, when we see Daemon delving for dragon eggs in the Dragonmont, the great beast towering over the prince, though it seems like we do actually see Vermithor again in Season 2, Episode 7 of House of the Dragon, just based on this teaser picture here. Vermithor would remain riderless until 129 AC, when Queen Rhaenyra would put out the call for more dragon riders and put out a search for dragon seeds being people who are bastards of House Targaryen, bastards of the Balerion line. Vermithor being claimed by one of these dragon seeds, a bastard named Hugh the Hammer. Hugh and Vermithor would ultimately be essential to Rhaenyra's cause in the war, as like I said, Vermithor was one of the largest dragons the Blacks possessed on their side, though it was riderless for the beginning of the Dance of the Dragons. Finally, we arrive at the greatest dragon of them all, the monstrous big chungus Vhagar, the oldest and largest dragon in House of the Dragons. Vhagar was said to have been born on Dragonstone in 52 BC before the conquest, making her close to 180 years old during the time of the Dance of the Dragons. Remember again, dragons basically will continue to grow and age indefinitely until eventually they die from their own size. Basically, they become so large they can't even move, so obese that they can't get up, and this this is what will kill them. Vhagar is the only surviving dragon from Aegon's conquest, Vhagar's first rider being Queen Visenya, the older sister and the wife of Aegon the Conqueror. Vhagar is by far the most battle-hardened dragon of all of them in the Dance of the Dragon, Vhagar taking part in Aegon's conquest as well as the First Dornish War and many other battles and wars throughout the hundreds of years it's been alive. Vhagar would remain riderless for 29 years after the death of Queen Visenya until ultimately Vhagar was claimed by Balon the Brave, who would later be named Hand of the King and then heir to the throne for King Jaehaerys, though he would die of a burst belly in 101 AC, the dragon then being claimed by Laena Velaryon, the second wife of Prince Daemon. As we know from House of the Dragon, Laena would ultimately suffer complications in childbirth, Laena in the show choosing to die of her own will and die the death of a dragon riser, asking Vhagar to set her alight. From here, the monstrous Vhagar would be claimed by the young Prince Aemon, an act that would ultimately cause him to lose his eye, a pretty fair trade in my book. Vhagar is easily the largest and oldest dragon in our story, this great green monstrous beast easily towering over all of the other dragons that we will see. For context, we see how large Vhagar is in comparison to the young dragon Arrax here in this scene, but the beast is easily 2 to 3 times as big as Meleys, as we see in their battle over Rook's Rest, which does make sense, as again, Vhagar is nearly 100 years older than Meleys, I think, if my math is correct, and roughly 80 years older than Vermithor, making it easily the most oldest dragon in our story. Vhagar is truly a monster and an absolute freaking unit of a dragon, and is completely terrifying to behold. While it may have lost its speed in its old age, its sheer size, strength, and the power of its flames make it easily the most dangerous beast in all of House of the Dragon. Now we move on to the second part of the video where I'll be discussing all of the dragons that are yet to appear in House of the Dragons. These dragons likely to appear in Season 3 and Season 4, however some of these dragons are actually unlikely to appear at all in our show. First we start off with a number of the smaller dragons that will likely not appear in House of the Dragons, or at least if they do, will only make kind of a brief minor appearance in our show, the first being the 2 young dragons Morghul and Shrykos. These 2 young dragons were bound to King Aegon II's twin children, Jaehaera and Jaehaerys, respectively. Obviously, Jaehaerys gets his head cut off by Blood and Cheese, so he never gets to ride his dragon, and Jaehaera, according to Fire and Blood, never actually rode Morghul, so I would be surprised if either of these 2 dragons do actually appear in our show. In the same vein, we have the young dragon hatchling Morning, which is born from one of the eggs that were taken to the Vale by Rhaena. In Fire and Blood, Rhaena is actually the one who bonds with Morning, but it doesn't seem like the show is going to go this route, as it very much appears from Season 2, Episode 6, that Rhaena Targaryen is possibly being set up to bond with the wild dragon Sheepstealer. Sheepstealer was a large wild dragon that was said to have been born sometime around 35 AC, which would make it close to 100 years old during the Dance of the Dragons. It was said that this dragon was an ugly mud brown color and received its name for regularly hunting the sheep of the shepherds of Westeros. This dragon, while being older, was described as being slender. Possibly this is because it wasn't fed as well as the other dragons on Dragonstone, though I have a feeling that when it appears in House of the Dragons, they're going to make it a lot bigger than how it is described in Fire and Blood. And yes, I am 90% sure, maybe even 95% sure that Sheepstealer will make an appearance in House of the Dragons after we saw a scene in Season 2, Episode 6, where Rhaena encounters a large patch of burnt grass and the bones of dead sheep, Lady Arryn then confirming that yes, a wild dragon has resided in the Vale, as it seems as though the show is setting up Rhaena Targaryen to ultimately claim the wild dragon Sheepstealer. In Fire and Blood, Sheepstealer is claimed by the bastard Nettles, but so far it doesn't seem like Nettles is going to be a character in House of the Dragons, as she has not been cast yet, so it seems like they are going to give the role of the rider of Sheepstealer to Rhaena Targaryen instead. At the time of recording, the last episode to come out was Season 2, Episode 6 of House of the Dragon, and I think that it is very likely and possible that we will even see Sheepstealer make an appearance at the end of Season 2. Next, we have the dragon Dreamfyre, a great blue dragon that was first claimed by Rhaena Targaryen in 35 AC, later being claimed by Helaena Targaryen, the daughter of Alicent and King Viserys. Dreamfyre then would be close to 100 years old in the Dance of the Dragon, though it is likely if it does make an appearance at all, it would only be a brief appearance in the show House of the Dragons. After the death of her son Jaehaerys, Queen Elena would enter into a deep depression. Elena, it was said, never riding her dragon once again after the death of her son. However, a dragon that will likely make an appearance in House of the Dragons is Tessarion, the dragon that is ridden by Daeron Targaryen, the youngest son of Queen Alicent and King Viserys. Tessarion is a young blue she-dragon said to have been born sometime around 120 AC. Tessarion was the youngest of the dragons of fighting size that belonged to the Greens, the dragon said to be one-third the size of Vermithor. However, with the mention of Daeron in Season 2, Episode 6 in House of the Dragon, I do think it is possible that we will see Tessarion make an appearance, possibly in Season 3 or Season 4, assuming that there is a Season 4 of House of the Dragon. Next, we have the silver she-dragon Silverwing, said to have been born in 36 AC and first claimed by Queen Alicent Targaryen, making it somewhere between 80 to 90 years old during the Dance of the Dragon. Silverwing would remain riderless for 29 years after the death of Queen Alicent, the dragon remaining in Dragonstone until it was ultimately claimed by the Targaryen bastard, Ulf the White. Ulf claiming in House of the Dragon to be the bastard half-brothers of Viserys and Daemon Targaryen. The final two dragons in this video are the two remaining wild dragons in the Dance of the Dragons, Grey Ghost and Cannibal, both of which I think are unlikely to make appearances in House of the Dragons, but I guess anything is possible. To me, it is very likely that we will see Grey Ghost make an appearance, as in Fire and Blood. Grey Ghost was killed in the skies by Sunfyre, although we know what happened with Sunfyre, so obviously it's hard to tell exactly what will happen with Grey Ghost, but to me personally, I think it's unlikely that we will see Grey Ghost appear in House of the Dragon. Finally, we have the wild dragon Cannibal, possibly besides Vhagar, the most infamous dragon in all of our series. Cannibal was said to be a coal-black dragon that dwelled on Dragonstone and gained its name from preying on younger dragons. Yes, it f***ing cannibalized them. The exact age of Cannibal is unknown. It was said to be a large dragon, though not as large as Vhagar or Vermithor, which would lead me to believe that the dragon was younger than both of them, still making it quite old though. However, the people of Dragonstone had supposedly reported that Cannibal had been living on the island even long before the Targaryens would arrive in 114 BC before the Conquering, which, according to them, would make it the oldest dragon in all of Westerosi history, though to me this seems rather unlikely. Cannibal was never claimed by any writer during the Dance of the Dragons, and any that tried never actually lived to tell the tale, so to me it seems very unlikely that we will actually see Cannibal make an appearance in House of the Dragon, though I guess it is possible, and it would be kind of fun for Cannibal to make a fun cameo, one-time appearance on screen, though again, this does seem unlikely to me. Every dragon scene, CGI scene in House of the Dragons cost them a ton of money. I don't even want to know how much money it costs, especially for a big dragon like Vhagar, so it's just really not that realistic for them to include every single dragon that is mentioned in the Dance of the Dragons within the show House of the Dragons, though I guess a guy can dream, right? And yes, this was every single dragon that has appeared in House of the Dragons so far, as every single dragon that appears in the Dance of the Dragons and will very possibly appear in future seasons of House of the Dragon. Unfortunately, not every single one of these dragons can make an appearance in House of the Dragons. As I said at the end of the Cannibal section, it cost them a ton of money to make these CGI dragons, and the bigger the dragon, the longer the dragon scene, the more money that it will cost them. So it just isn't feasible for them to include a scene featuring every single dragon that makes an appearance in Fire and Blood during the Dance of the Dragons. Unfortunately, it's just not possible. If you did enjoy this video or learn something new, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as that is the easiest way to help support me and to put this video into the algorithm. Let me know in the comment section down below what your favorite dragon from the House of the Dragons is, and what dragon that hasn't made an appearance you would like to see in House of the Dragons. If you did enjoy this video and want to check out some of my other content, like some of my other House of the Dragons content, which is on screen now, as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Until next time, stay safe out there. Peace. Love. Adu.